Alaikum everyone. Hope everyone had a wonderful, wonderful week. Parshas Bereshit. We begin once again reading the Torah from the beginning, and let's take a moment and explore the first Rashi in Chumash. The first Rashi famously asks the question, why did the Torah begin over here with the Brias HaOlam, the creation of the world? Why not start with the first mitzvah of HaChodesh Hazeh Lachem? And Rashi tells us that the Torah wanted to establish Hashem, Bereshit bara Elokim es Hashemayim ve'es haaretz, to highlight that Hashem could go and give Eretz Yisrael to whichever people he wanted to, and therefore he chose Knesset Yisrael as his chosen people to give them Eretz Yisrael. That's the famous Rashi. He quotes the name of Rav Yitzchak. However, one can ask the question, good, the first two prakim address the Brias HaOlam, and therefore we need to open up to establish Hashem as the Borei, as the creator. But what about the rest of Sefer Bereshit? What about all the stories in Perek Gimel of Bereshit, Perek Dalet, Perek Hey, Parshas Noach, Lech Lecha throughout. So let's dispose of Lech Lecha until Vayechi. There we're talking about the stories of Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, the Shvatim, Yosef. Fundamental, critically important to understand the genetic code of Knesset Yisrael, the background, the family of Israel, Bnei Yisrael, literally not the nation, but the family of Israel. That's necessary. But why do we need all of Parshas Noach? Why do we need the balance of Parshas Bereshit? What does that add? Why do we have to know that? And I think there is something very fundamental over here. And that is, if we look at these prakim, what we note is they all are about sin. They're all about Averos and the punishment for those Averos. We have the Avera of the Nachash and his punishment. We have the Avera of Chava, of Adam. We have Cain and Hevel, the first murder. We have the story of, at the end of Parshas Bereshit, the Bnei HaElohim, and they take women and do things that are inappropriate. Then we introduce to Noach, and we're told about that the whole world is full of Hamas, is full of theft, Gezel, that's Nigzar Dinam al HaGezel, and that's a corrupt world, and Hashem has to destroy the world. And then finally, the end of Parshas Noach, we're told about the Dor HaPalaga, the Tower of Babel. They seek Lasel shame, they want to make a name for themselves, they want to rebel against God, and once again they're dispersed, they're punished, and they're given separate languages. So there's a theme that runs through the balance of Parshas Bereshit and the balance of Parshas Noach, and that theme, I would call it crime and punishment. It's Avera after Avera after Avera. We literally go from one to the other. We're out of Gan Eden for a little bit. The first fratricide, Cain kills Hevel, and one after another. And then Parshas Noach, we have not Averos of Yechidim, of individuals, but Averos of a whole population, populace, nations, Tzibur. So what's the message over here? I think the message is this is a critically important backdrop to the Torah itself. Because what if man is left to his own devices? That's what the Torah is telling us. If you leave man alone, if he doesn't have a code, a rule of law, if he doesn't have a Torah, a divinely inspired Torah, left to his own devices, it's not a pretty sight. We are involved in terrible behaviors. Mankind has a animalistic side, has a side that desires power, that desires conquest, that desires warfare, and we see that that can become a dominant side unless it is disciplined, it is curbed by a vision, what I will call a Judeo-ethic, unless it's curbed by a Torah, by a divine mission, a divine command. And that's the background. That's what Hashem wants us to understand about this complex nature. There's tremendous potential in mankind, but there's also potential for degraded behavior, deleterious behavior, behavior that will steep into great sin. And that's what the Torah wants us to understand as the background, and then says, yes, let us learn about the family of Yisrael that will be the vehicle through the redemption of the world, and ultimately the Torah, the rule of law, the rule of divine law that will facilitate the redemption. And that's really the background of Torah. That's what we want to know. That's what we need to understand in order to position ourselves to understand the importance of having a Torah Hashem, the importance for mankind, and certainly, of course, for the Jewish people. Have a wonderful Shabbos Kodesh.